The house was burning, not in a metaphorical sense, not in some poetic, heartbroken way. No, Jessica's designer clothes, her expensive handbags, her treasured possessions were literally turning to ash in the front yard. The fire roared, licking the night sky, casting wild shadows against the empty driveway. She hadn't come home yet. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the flames dance. A part of me expected to feel regret, to feel something. But all I felt was the crisp night air against my skin and the distant hum of sirens growing closer. This wasn't rage. This wasn't impulse. This was justice. Because just 24 hours ago, I had been a devoted husband, clueless, blind. And then, I heard her. I heard Jessica bragging to her best friend about how she was cheating on me, how I was too much of a loser to ever leave her. She was wrong. And by the time she got home, everything she cared about, everything she built this fake, perfect life around, would be gone. Hours before the fire, before the world I knew turned to ash, I was just another unsuspecting fool. It started with laughter. Not mine, Jessica's. I had come home early from work, a rare thing, looking forward to a quiet evening. The house was empty, but I heard her voice drifting in from the back patio. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the way she spoke, so carefree, so arrogant, made me freeze in place. I swear, Lauren, he's completely clueless. I frowned. She was talking about me. Jessica laughed again, that high-pitched, fake giggle she used when she thought she was being clever. I tried a dark color Johnson, and it was amazing. Way better than my loser husband. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, pressing against the wall. My breath caught in my throat as I forced myself to listen. He's such an idiot, she continued, completely unaware I was just feet away. I mean, I could sleep with half the city, and he still wouldn't leave me. He's too weak. I clenched my fists. The blood in my veins turned ice cold. Besides, she went on, why would I give this up? He pays the bills. He cooks, cleans, does everything while I have my fun. It's a perfect setup. And if he ever finds out, please, he wouldn't have the balls to do anything about it. I had heard enough. I turned and walked out of the house before she could see me. I didn't remember getting in my car. I didn't remember driving. All I knew was that I ended up in a parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, my breathing shallow. She had been lying to me for who knows how long. She had been using me, mocking me. And for what? Some cheap thrill? A sick part of me wanted to believe it wasn't true, that maybe I had misheard. But deep down, I knew. Jessica had never respected me. I thought back to the little things. The way she always had an excuse for coming home late, the way she guarded her phone like a secret agent, the way her touch had grown colder over the years. It had all been leading to this moment. I wasn't weak. I wasn't clueless. I had to show her that. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I went to a bar across town, one she never went to. I sat in the corner, nursing a drink, my mind racing. Leaving her? That would be the easy way out. But Jessica deserved worse. She had built her life on lies, on manipulation, on using me as a doormat. It was time to take all of that away. So I made a plan. First, I secured my finances. I called my lawyer, explained everything. He was more than eager to help once I showed him the evidence I had gathered. Screenshots of her texts, pictures of her with other men, recordings of her own damn words. Then, I packed my essentials and moved my most valuable items into storage. Everything else? Fair game. And finally, I waited. The next morning, Jessica kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just bragged about screwing another man. Love you, she said, flashing a smile. I stared at her, expressionless. Yeah. She didn't even notice the coldness in my voice. By the time she left for work, everything was in motion. That afternoon, I went home and got to work. Jessica's designer clothes? Out in the yard. Her jewelry, shoes, all the gifts I ever bought her, piled on top. I made sure to remove my things first. No need for unnecessary collateral damage. Then, I grabbed the can of lighter fluid. By the time the sun set, the flames were dancing. I didn't feel bad. Not for a second. This wasn't the end. this was just the beginning. The fire had taken hold quickly, devouring everything in its path. The silk dresses, the overpriced handbags, the designer shoes, burned to cinders in a matter of minutes. The flames cast long, erratic shadows across the driveway, flickering against the cold, black sky. The wind carried the scent of melting leather, the acrid stench of burned fabric, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Jessica had built her world around appearances. Everything about her was carefully curated, from her Instagram-perfect outfits to the way she carried herself at social events, always the charming, sophisticated wife. But underneath it all, she was a fraud, a shallow, self-absorbed parasite who fed off my devotion, mistaking my kindness for weakness. She had taken everything for granted, and now I was taking everything from her. The sirens grew louder in the distance, but I didn't move. I had no intention of running. There was nothing illegal about what I had done. I hadn't torched the house, just the garbage that she valued more than me. If anything, I had simply taken out the trash in the most dramatic way possible. I took a deep breath, the crisp night air mixing with the lingering smoke, and waited. Jessica pulled into the driveway just as the first fire truck screeched to a stop. Her car hadn't even fully stopped when she flung the door open, her heels clicking against the pavement as she sprinted toward the scene. The way her face twisted when she saw the destruction was almost poetic. "No, no, no, no," she screamed, stumbling toward the pile of ash that had once been her prized possessions. She dropped to her knees, hands trembling as she reached for something, anything that might have survived. There was nothing left. Tears streamed down her face as she whipped around, her eyes wild with fury. What the hell happened? I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, watching, letting her take it all in, letting her feel, for the first time, what it was like to lose something she cared about. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm. I cleaned out the house. Jessica blinked, as if she couldn't comprehend the words. "You," her voice cracked, her anger bubbling to the surface. "You did this? Are you out of your *****ing mind?" I tilted my head slightly. Am I? Or were you just too arrogant to think there'd be consequences? Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, some way to manipulate the situation like she always did. But this time, she had nothing. No sweet words, no fake tears, no carefully rehearsed lies. All she had was the wreckage of her own making. "You're insane," she spat, pushing herself to her feet. "Do you know how much that stuff cost? How much? How much I paid for it?" I cut her off. "Yeah, I do." She froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again, like she was struggling to form a response. But there was nothing left to say. She had spent years treating me like a doormat, believing I'd always be there to clean up after her, to fund her lifestyle, to take whatever scraps of affection she decided to throw my way. Not anymore. "You ruined my life," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling embers. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "No, Jessica, you did that all on your own." The police arrived not long after. Someone, probably a nosy neighbor, had called them. A few officers stepped out, scanning the scene with wary expressions. One of them, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes, approached me first. "What happened here?" he asked, his gaze shifting between me and Jessica, who still stood frozen in shock. I shrugged. "Just getting rid of some old things. Nothing illegal about burning your own property, is there?" The officer sighed, rubbing his temple. He looked over at Jessica, who was still shaking with anger. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" For a moment, I actually thought she might. But then, reality hit her. She had nothing. No proof. No legal ground to stand on. If she tried to go after me, the truth about her affair would come out, and I'd already made sure she'd get nothing in the divorce. So instead, she did the only thing she could. She turned and walked away. Not toward me. Not toward the cops. Just away. The weight of her own downfall pressing against her like a suffocating vice. I watched her go, and for the first time in years, I felt free. That night, I didn't stay in what used to be our home. There was nothing left for me there. I had already packed my essentials, and the divorce papers were ready to be served. Jessica had spent years believing she was untouchable, that I was weak, that I would never have the courage to walk away. She had underestimated me. As I drove away, the last remnants of smoke fading into the night behind me, I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt done. Jessica would wake up tomorrow with nothing but regrets and an empty house. And me? I had everything ahead of me. The road stretched endlessly before me, the dark pavement illuminated only by the sharp beams of my headlights. The city blurred past, neon signs and flickering streetlights reflecting against the wet asphalt. But my mind wasn't in the present. It was still back there, standing in the cold night air, watching Jessica crumble into nothing. I had expected satisfaction, a sense of finality, the sweet relief of justice, but all I felt was emptiness. Revenge, as it turned out, was a hollow victory. The weight of betrayal was still there, pressing against my chest like a slow, suffocating force. Jessica was gone from my life, stripped of everything she cared about, but the scars she left behind weren't so easily erased. I could still hear her voice in my head, laughing, belittling, mocking. I could still see the messages, the texts she thought I'd never read, the ones where she humiliated me behind my back. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles aching from the pressure. I needed to clear my head. Pulling into a motel parking lot on the outskirts of town, I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the worn-out neon sign flickering above the entrance. A cheap place, the kind where no one asked questions, where no one cared why you were there. Perfect. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old cigarette smoke and cheap cleaning products. The clerk barely looked at me as he slid the key across the counter, his attention fixed on a small, static-filled TV in the corner. I didn't say anything, just grabbed the key and made my way down the dimly lit hallway. The room was just as I expected, plain, outdated, lifeless. A stiff bed, a scratched wooden desk, a flickering lamp in the corner. It didn't matter. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here to disappear for the night. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. No new ones. Not from Jessica, not from anyone who mattered. Just silence. I let out a slow breath and leaned back against the headboard. This was my life now. No more pretending. No more being the dutiful, clueless husband. And yet, beneath it all, a question gnawed at me. Had I really won? Morning came too soon. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of a restless haze, my mind replaying the events over and over. The fire, Jessica's face, the way she had looked at me, as if for the first time. She realized I was someone who could destroy her. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion. After a quick shower, I threw on my jacket and stepped outside. The world felt different now, quieter, like something had been stripped away. I wasn't the same man I had been yesterday. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing. My car was still parked where I had left it, but something felt off. A strange stillness, an eerie quiet that sent a prickle down my spine. It wasn't until I got closer that I noticed it. The tires, slashed. Deep, jagged cuts ran across all four of them, the black rubber torn apart with precision. Whoever had done this hadn't been in a hurry. They had taken their time, making sure I wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. A slow, simmering rage built in my chest. Jessica. Of course it was her. Who else? She had nothing left to lose, nothing to hold on to. So she lashed out in the only way she could. I clenched my jaw, inhaling sharply. She thought she could drag me down with her, that she could still control me, even now. She was wrong. The motel clerk didn't care when I asked about security cameras. He just shrugged, barely looking up from his newspaper. People come and go, he muttered. If it's that important, call the cops. I almost laughed. The cops wouldn't do a damn thing. They hadn't cared last night when I burned my own property, and they wouldn't care now. This was nothing to them. Just another petty domestic dispute. Another case of a bitter ex trying to make a statement. I wasn't going to play that game. Instead, I called a tow truck. The driver, a gruff man with a cigarette hanging from his lips, didn't ask questions as he loaded my car onto the flatbed. "Where to?" he asked, exhaling a thick cloud of smoke. I hesitated for a second before answering. Downtown, I said. I need a fresh start. By noon, I had a rental car and a plan. Jessica had always been the type to rely on others, her friends, her lovers, me. Without someone to prop her up, she would crumble. And I had no doubt she was already looking for her next victim, her next safety net. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one last thing I needed to do. Driving back toward the city, I took the long route, passing by places that had once meant something. The coffee shop where we used to go on Sunday mornings. The park where I had proposed to her. The apartment where we had first lived together, back when things had been real. Or at least, when I had thought they were real. It was all gone now. Nothing but ghosts. Finally, I pulled up to the law office. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I stepped inside. "Mr. Callahan is expecting you," she said, gesturing toward a sleek glass door at the end of the hallway. Inside, my lawyer sat behind a massive desk, a stack of papers already prepared in front of him. He looked up, adjusting his glasses. "You sure about this?" I nodded. "Make it final. No settlements, no negotiations. She gets nothing." He didn't ask why. He already knew. I signed the papers without hesitation. With every stroke of the pen, I felt something loosen inside me. The weight, the anger, the years of wasted time. Jessica had lost, and I was finally free. Walking out of that office, the air felt different, lighter. The past no longer had chains around my ankles. Jessica would try to fight it, of course. She'd scream, cry, try to guilt me into backing down. But it was over. She had made her choice. And now, I had made mine. The road ahead was mine alone. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. The world didn't stop spinning just because my marriage had burned to the ground. People still went to work, couples still held hands on the sidewalks, and somewhere out there, Jessica was probably plotting her next move. But she wasn't my problem anymore. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The divorce papers had been signed, and legally, there was nothing left tying me to her. No shared accounts, no house, no reason to ever see her face again. She had no money, no security, and no way to crawl back into my life. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt like a shadow of myself. I had spent so long pretending, playing the role of the oblivious husband while secretly orchestrating my revenge. Now that it was over, the silence was deafening. The anger, the pain, the cold satisfaction of watching her crumble. It had all been a distraction, a way to avoid the real question. Who was I now? I spent the next few days trying to move on, trying to rebuild something from the wreckage Jessica had left behind. I found a new apartment, small, quiet, nothing fancy. I went back to work, buried myself in projects, forced myself into some semblance of a routine. But she wasn't done haunting me. It started with the phone calls. At first, they were spaced out, one every few hours, then one every hour, then back to back. I never answered. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what she wanted. She was desperate. I could picture her now, curled up in some cheap motel room, her hair a mess, her nails chipped from stress. Jessica had spent years convincing herself she was untouchable, that she could get away with anything because I would always be there to clean up the mess. But I had taken that safety net away. And now, she was spiraling. The texts followed soon after. "Ethan, please. Just talk to me. I need to explain. You don't understand what really happened. I had no choice." I laughed bitterly at that one. No choice? She had plenty of choices. She just happened to choose betrayal. Then, the tone shifted. "You think you won? You think you can just walk away? You have no idea what I'm capable of." There she was. The real Jessica. The one who always thought she could manipulate her way out of anything. I didn't respond. Silence was the one thing she couldn't handle. But she didn't stop there. The first time I saw her again, it was by accident. At least, that's what I thought. I had just finished grabbing groceries, something I hadn't done for myself in years. Jessica had always handled that, and now I realized how much I had let her take control of even the smallest aspects of my life. It was strange, picking out my own food, deciding what I actually wanted instead of just eating whatever she brought home. I stepped out into the parking lot, balancing the paper bags in my arms, when I felt it. That prickling sensation, like being watched. I turned my head slightly, scanning the lot, and then I saw her. She was sitting in her car across from mine, engine running, sunglasses covering her face. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as if realizing she had been caught, she pulled out of the space and drove off without looking back. I exhaled slowly. That wasn't a coincidence. She wasn't done with me yet. The second time, she made sure I saw her. It was late. I had just gotten home, kicking off my shoes and tossing my keys onto the counter when I heard it. A knock. Not a polite one. A slow, deliberate knock, each beat echoing through the quiet apartment like a ticking time bomb. I already knew who it was. For a split second, I considered ignoring it, letting her stand out there in the cold, letting her feel the weight of being unwanted. But I knew Jessica. She wouldn't leave. She would stand there for hours, maybe scream, maybe make a scene. I opened the door. There she was. Her once perfect hair was unkempt, her makeup smudged, her expression unreadable. She looked like a woman who had lost everything. Because she had. "What do you want, Jessica?" My voice was steady, controlled. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped forward, her perfume hitting me like a sickening reminder of the past. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice softer than I had ever heard it. I should have slammed the door in her face. Instead, I let her in. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear whatever pathetic excuse she had come up with. I needed to see, one last time, the woman I had once loved, the woman who had destroyed me. She sat on my couch like she belonged there, like nothing had changed. "Do you even feel bad?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She looked down, biting her lip. Classic Jessica. The act. The performance. "Ethan, don't lie to me." Her jaw clenched. The pity act dropped. "Fine," she snapped. "You want the truth?" I cheated. I lied. I did what I had to do. I laughed coldly. "What you had to do? You don't understand." She leaned forward, eyes flashing. "I was stuck, Ethan. Trapped. You were so boring. Predictable. Always playing it safe. Always doing the right thing. I needed excitement. I needed passion." I stared at her, stunned. "Passion?" I repeated. "Yes." She ran a hand through her hair, exasperated. "And yeah, maybe I handled things wrong. Maybe I got carried away. But you weren't enough for me anymore." I nodded slowly. "So you destroyed everything." She shrugged. "It was already broken." I should have been furious, but all I felt was pity. Jessica had convinced herself she was the victim in all this, that I had somehow failed her, that my loyalty, my love, my commitment had been the problem. I stood up, walking toward the door. "Get out." She blinked. "Ethan, get out." She hesitated, then let out a bitter laugh. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said quietly. "The mistake was ever loving you." For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Regret. But it was too late. She walked out, and this time, I didn't watch her leave. I just locked the door behind her. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. Jessica was out of my life. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. I had slammed the door on her, cut her off, erased every trace of her from my world. She had no way back in, no more cards to play. She was nothing to me now. But Jessica was like a disease, one that refused to die quietly. She didn't disappear. She escalated. The first sign was the scratches on my car. It was a crisp morning, and I was running late for work. I stepped outside, coffee in one hand, keys in the other, only to stop dead in my tracks. Deep, jagged lines ran across the driver's side of my car, carving through the paint like an open wound. Someone had taken a key, or something sharper, and dragged it across the metal with deliberate force. I didn't need to guess who. My jaw clenched. I took a slow breath, forcing down the anger threatening to explode. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to break, to come running, to confront her, to let her sink her claws back into my life. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I snapped a few pictures, called my insurance, and got in the car like nothing had happened. But that was just the beginning. A few days later, I started noticing things moving in my apartment. It was small at first, barely noticeable. A picture frame tilted slightly on my nightstand. My jacket draped over a different chair than where I had left it. My toothbrush damp when I hadn't used it yet. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was imagining things. Then, one night, I came home and found my fridge open. Every single item inside had been pulled out and left on the counter. Milk dripping onto the floor, eggs cracked in the sink. A half-eaten sandwich sitting there like someone had taken a bite and walked away. The air inside felt wrong. Stale. Heavy. Like someone had been there. Watching. I backed up slowly, every instinct in my body screaming. I checked the locks, checked the windows. Nothing was broken. Nothing forced open. She had a key. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Jessica had lived here with me for years. Of course, she had a spare key. And now, she was using it. I changed the locks the next day. I should have done it sooner, but a part of me had believed, naively, that she would let go, that she would move on, find some other poor soul to sink her teeth into. But Jessica wasn't the type to move on. She was the type to destroy. The next message came in the middle of the night. I woke up to my phone buzzing relentlessly. Half asleep, I grabbed it, squinting at the screen. Jessica, did you think you could just erase me? You don't get to walk away from me, Ethan. I made you. I own you. I stared at the words, a cold weight settling in my stomach. This wasn't desperation anymore. This was obsession. The next morning, I filed a restraining order. I didn't care if it made me look weak, if people whispered that I was just a man too scared of his crazy ex. I knew what Jessica was capable of. I wasn't about to find out what happened if I let this continue. The process was frustrating, slow, but eventually, the order was granted. Jessica was officially forbidden from coming near me, from entering my property, from contacting me in any way. It should have been the end of it. But Jessica had never been one to follow rules. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I was coming home late. Work had dragged on longer than usual, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. My new locks gleamed under the porch light as I approached the door, my mind already drifting toward sleep. Then I stopped. The door was open. Not just unlocked. Wide. Open. A slow chill crawled up my spine. My breath turned sharp, my fingers tightening around my keys. She was inside. I stepped in cautiously, muscles tensed. My senses dialed up to 11. The apartment was dark, silent, but not empty. I could feel it. The air was thick with it. Then, movement. A shadow in the corner. A figure stepping out of the darkness. Jessica. She stood there, barefoot, hair a tangled mess, eyes wild. She was wearing one of my shirts, an old one she must have stolen before she left. Her lips curled into a slow, eerie smile. "Hey, baby," she whispered. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done. "You need to leave," I said, voice low, dangerous. She cocked her head, as if amused. "Or what?" I took a step closer. "Or I'll make you." Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then, she laughed. A breathy, broken sound. "You don't get it, do you?" she murmured. "We belong together, Ethan." I clenched my fists. "No, Jessica. We don't." Her eyes darkened. "You don't get to say that." She moved fast. Too fast. I barely had time to react before she lunged, nails clawing, teeth bared. I caught her wrists, twisting hard, forcing her back. She thrashed, screaming, cursing, her face contorted with pure, unfiltered rage. This wasn't a woman anymore. This was a monster. "Let me go," she shrieked. I didn't. I held her there, arms locked, heart pounding. "You're done, Jessica," I growled. "This is over." She struggled for another second. Then, suddenly, she went limp. Her breathing was ragged, her body trembling. And then, she started sobbing. Not real tears. Fake. Manipulative. The same old act. I shoved her away, stepping back. "Get out." She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head, whispering, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just watched as she turned, walking out the door into the night. For the last time. The next morning, I woke up to the news. Jessica had been arrested. Breaking and entering. Violation of a restraining order. Assault. It was over. Really, truly over. And as I stood there, staring at the screen, I finally felt it. Relief. Jessica was gone, and I was finally free. The relief didn't last long. Jessica was arrested, sure. But if I had learned anything from this nightmare, it was that she wasn't the type to just give up. She'd been in police custody for less than 24 hours when the messages started coming in. I had blocked every number she had, but she found new ones. Random, burner phones, social media accounts under fake names. You think this is over? Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. You took everything from me. Now it's my turn. At first, I ignored them, blocked, deleted, moved on. But then I started noticing something worse. She wasn't just threatening me. She was dragging everyone else into it. I was at work when my boss called me into his office. He was an older guy, no nonsense, not the type to waste words. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. He turned his monitor toward me. Care to explain this? I frowned, stepping closer. It was an email. From Ethan Collins. Except, of course, I hadn't sent it. My stomach twisted as I read the words. Lies. Accusations. Confessions of crimes I had never committed. Jessica had sent it. She had impersonated me, emailed my boss, and filled the message with so much filth, so much fabricated garbage, that I could feel my blood boiling under my skin. That's not me, I said immediately. It's my ex. She's been stalking me, harassing me. He held up a hand. Relax. I figured as much. I exhaled, tension easing slightly. But Ethan, he continued, voice firm, you need to handle this, because if she keeps pulling this kind of thing, people will start believing it. That was her game. She couldn't reach me physically anymore. So she was trying to destroy my life in other ways. Over the next week, she sent similar emails to my coworkers, my friends, even my parents. One of them claimed I had stolen money from my job. Another said I had an affair with a married coworker. The worst one? That I had been abusing her for years. It was the kind of thing that, once thrown out there, never fully goes away. Even when people don't believe it, the doubt lingers. The whispers never fully die down. She wanted to ruin me. And the worst part? It was working. I had to do something. Ignoring her wasn't enough. Blocking her wasn't enough. I needed to end this. For good. I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The best damn attorney I could find. This wasn't just about a restraining order anymore. It wasn't just about some petty harassment. This was war. We built a case. Collected evidence. Every message she had ever sent. Every false accusation. Every attempt to break into my home, damage my property, manipulate my life. And then we took it to court. The day of the hearing, I saw her for the first time in weeks. She looked different. Thinner. More tired. But the moment our eyes met, I saw it. The same twisted obsession burning behind them. She smiled. Like this was just another game. Like she still had the upper hand. I clenched my fists. Not this time. The trial was brutal. Jessica sobbed on the stand, spinning lies with ease, trying to paint herself as the victim. But we had the evidence. And when my lawyer presented it, when he tore apart every single lie she had spewed, her mask started to crack. For the first time since this nightmare began, Jessica realized she was losing, and that scared her more than anything. In the end, the judge saw through her act. She was found guilty of harassment, defamation, and violating the restraining order. She was sentenced to jail time. Not long, but enough. Enough to finally make her disappear. Enough for me to breathe again. When it was over, I walked outside, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I was free. Jessica was gone, and I could finally start living again. I thought that was the end. I thought I had one. But as I walked back to my car, phone buzzing in my pocket, I glanced at the screen and froze. A new message. From an unknown number. See you soon, baby. Jessica was in jail. But somehow, she still wasn't done. For a moment, I just stared at my phone. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and rage. See you soon, baby. It couldn't be her. Jessica was behind bars, locked away, stripped of her freedom, just like she had tried to strip me of mine. And yet, somehow, she was still reaching out. My first thought was that someone was helping her. Maybe a friend. Maybe some twisted admirer she had manipulated into doing her dirty work. I clenched my jaw, forcing down the anger bubbling up in my chest. No, she wouldn't get under my skin again. Not this time. I had one. I had taken back my life. I wasn't about to let her steal another second of it. At first, I ignored it. I refused to engage. I had spent too long playing her game, getting dragged into her chaos, letting her dictate my every move. I was done, and for a while, it worked. The messages kept coming, some threatening, some desperate, some eerily sweet like she actually believed I'd miss her, but I never responded. And slowly, they started to fade. Days passed, then weeks, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I started to feel normal. I went back to work without worrying about what lies she might spread next. I reconnected with friends, people I had pushed away when I was drowning in her insanity. I even started dating again, just casual, nothing serious. I wasn't ready for anything deep, not yet, but I was learning how to live for myself again, and it felt good. Like I had finally escaped the black hole Jessica had tried to pull me into. Like I was finally free. Until the letter arrived. It was sitting in my mailbox, wedged between bills and junk mail. Nothing special about it at first glance. No return address. No name. Just a plain white envelope with my name scrawled across the front in handwriting I knew too well. My stomach twisted as I ripped it open. The moment I saw the first line, I felt my pulse spike. Ethan, my love. I almost crumpled it right then and there. Almost set it on fire, tossed the ashes into the wind, and let her final words die before they could reach me. But I didn't. Some sick part of me needed to see, needed to know what she had to say. So I read it. And as I did, the anger, the disgust, the hatred I thought I had buried came roaring back with a vengeance. You really thought you could get rid of me? That locking me away would be the end of our story? Oh, Ethan, you never understood, did you? I'm not just a part of your past. I am your forever. I've been watching, Even from here, I see everything. I know you think you've won, that you've moved on, that you're safe. But let me tell you a secret, my love. You will never be safe from me. People like me don't just disappear. We don't fade into the background, forgotten and discarded like a bad memory. No, we wait, we watch, and when the time is right, we return. Enjoy your little taste of freedom while you can, because one day when you least expect it, I'll be there. Maybe in a month, maybe in a year, maybe even longer. But when you finally feel like you've escaped me, that's when you'll hear my voice again. That's when you'll turn around and see me smiling. See you soon, baby. My hands shook as I finished reading. I gritted my teeth, my entire body going rigid with rage. Even now, she was still trying to get into my head, still trying to make me fear her. But I refused. I was done being her victim. If she thought she could worm her way back into my life, she was wrong. Dead wrong. I didn't report the letter. I didn't call my lawyer. I didn't even tell anyone about it, because I knew exactly what she wanted. Attention, control, and I wasn't giving her either. I burned the letter, watched as the flames consumed her words, turned them to ash, and carried them away with the wind. Then I walked back inside, locked the door behind me, and poured myself a drink. And as I sat there, staring at the flickering light of the fireplace, I made a promise to myself. Jessica could play her sick little games all she wanted. She could send letters, threats, empty promises of revenge. But she would never have power over me again, because I wasn't the same man she had tried to break. I wasn't weak anymore. I had one. And no matter what she did next, I wasn't afraid of her anymore.